You don't need to buy anything to make these advent calendars. In fact, I made these with things most people throw away, and they turned out way better than I expected. Let me show you what you can make with just a few simple supplies. Alright, so before we get into the nitty gritty of how to make each calendar, I wanted to give you a little quick trick that I do every year. Right after Halloween, I get my kids to help me pick out 24 or 25 candies that they want to have in their advent calendars. And then I strategically place these inside of their calendars so that they have a sweet treat every day during the advent season. Now, something that I've found is you can either have your kids pick out the candies that they like or try to have the same candy every day for your kids so that they don't have fights over who gets what candy. What I've done for my Christmas countdown snowman is I've cut out a few pieces by using my Cricut, and I've cut out a few pieces by hand. So the top hat and the circles for the snowman were done by the Cricut. So I've got a 4-inch high by 6-inch wide hat with a 2-inch brim, and I've got 3 8-inch circles. This has all been cut out in old cereal boxes, and I have 10 of these 3-inch pieces that are about 11 inches long, which should be enough to go around my snowman. So I'm going to glue my snowman together. Like so. And then when he's dry, I'm going to simply attach the walls on all the way around. I want to make sure that the printed side of the cereal box is facing inwards, just so that there's no possibility of any color coming through my final wrapping job. Just using my faithful glue gun. And lots of glue. What I'm going to do is drop a bead of glue along the edge of the wall, and then I'm going to attach it on the side of the snowman. This takes a little bit of maneuvering, so sorry for the mess that this is going to make. And then of course the first pieces are always the hardest to get on. Working with circles is never easy. When doing this, some edges will need to be cut to make things fit a little better. Like that. And just gluing the rest of this in the same fashion. And on the joining pieces, I like to add a little bit of extra material in between the sections to help it stay together. In sections where I've got surplus wall, what I can do is I can cut it, but I have enough that if I fold it, I'll actually be able to continue using it along the extra side of the snowman. So I'm just going to fold it and have it as a curve here, like so. Now that the walls are glued onto my snowman, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to do another bead of glue around all of the edges on the inside and at any of the joining pieces, just to make sure that this structure holds together once my kids start to tear it apart later on. Now that the frame of my snowman is done, I'm going to start adding in the divider levels. So I've got more of these 3-inch wide wall pieces. So what I'm going to do, based off of my design, each circle is going to have 2 floors in it. The hat's going to have sort of 3 boxes inside of it. So I'm just going to start cutting this up, making it fit, and then gluing them in. This is really just an eyeballing activity. So I don't do any precise measurements, I just measure them out, glue them in, and off we go. Now that all the pieces are in, I don't really need to worry about how ugly it might look inside. That's all going to be covered up anyways. I'm going to run a little bit of extra glue around some of these bases because over time you notice when I was trying to put them in, they slipped and slid a little bit, so I need to just put a little bit more glue in there to make sure everything holds. All that's left now is to add in the dividers for each floor. So there's going to be, each sort of section has 2 sections with 2 slots and a section with 3 compartments. So I've got a bunch of these extra bits from before, so I'm just going to start putting them into spots, cutting them into size, and gluing them in as we go. Now that all of my compartments are in, the next thing that I need to do is I need to measure my wrapping paper. So the concept is that the snowman is going to be white, so I'm just going to use the back side of the wrapping paper to cover the snowman up. So I just need to trace the snowman out using my snowman. The ones that I like to do when I'm tracing this out later on when I'm cutting it, I want to make sure that I leave a little bit of extra space so that I can actually fold over the surplus wrapping paper to cover the edges so that it's a nice seamless edge at the front face of the snowman. So I'm quickly just going to trace this out. So my snowman's traced out, so now I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to remember to leave a little bit extra around the edges so that I can place that onto the side of my snowman. The one important thing to do is after filling in all the candy, it's important to take a picture of the slots to make sure that you know where you have candy for later on in the process. Now that all my candies are in, I can put on my snowman cover. I'm choosing to leave the white side out, but if you have a nice wrapping paper, you could alternately have the wrapping paper color facing outwards. So what I'm quickly going to do is with my glue gun, I'm going to run a bead of glue around all the edges so that when I put my cover on top, everything will stick to my snowman. Now I've taken some pictures of the locations of all of my treats so that when I'm putting the numbers on later, I know where to put the special days. So before I left a little bit of an edge around all of my sides so that I could pull the snowman down a little bit around the edges to hide the cardboard. So I'm quickly going to clean up all the edges by just cutting up, putting some notches in the sides here to allow for easy bending so that I can glue the rest of this onto the sides. I'm just going to glue around the edges and put down my extra wrapping paper. I'm not happy with the way that these edges turned out. My skills at measuring are clearly worse than I anticipated. So what I've done is I've cut out a 2-inch strip of wrapping paper and I'm going to try to nicely place it onto the top here so that I can glue it around the edges, and then I'm going to cut it and glue it down a little bit so that it looks a little bit nicer, hopefully. So So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just snip certain areas so that I can fold my top portions so that they fold nicely on top, like so. They'll be a little bit overlapping, but that will look hopefully better than it did before. Completely forgot that my top hat is black, so I'm just going to glue on my top hat here so that I've got a snowman with a top hat, because that's the whole purpose of it. Otherwise it would have been just a plain head. It's just cardstock, but I will need to help make some holes for later with that so that my boxes can get opened. The last things that are left to do is to install my numbers in my snowman pieces. So I've got some eyes and some noses. I printed all this out with my Cricut. I've got 2 eyes, 3 buttons, and a smile. So I'm just going to quickly glue these bits on so that I can have a nice looking outline for my snowman. One thing that I can do before I put all the numbers onto my snowman is I can make some slots for the holes before I put my numbers on them, just so that I don't have to worry about later on ripping the whole snowman when I'm trying to break into each compartment. I'm going to pre-make some holes just with a pin so that I've got some looseness in the material already. So just using a paper clip, I'm going to make some holes. So that picture I took before of my snowman with all the candy inside is now coming in handy so that I can put my snowflakes on them. I want to make sure that I get a nice prize on the last day, so I'm going to first put that number on it so I know not to mistakenly do that again. So I'm going to put my big 24 prize up here, and I'm going to try to cover up the holes that I made just so that when they're punching through it later we can not totally see them beforehand. the last thing that's left to do, and you don't need to do this, but I like to because I'm going to hang this up on my wall, is I'm going to attach some ribbon at the back so that it can hang up on a wall out of the way so my kids can do it once a day. So I'm just going to cut a piece of ribbon about that much so that I can have it hanging up and sort of out of the way. My nice cereal box background that nobody will see once it's up on the wall. This one is probably the easiest of them all. For this countdown calendar, I need a lot of cardstock for my stars and for my numbers. I've got some paper cups that are holiday themed, and I've got some ribbon. I pre-cut all of my stars with my Cricut. What I did when I was measuring these, I measured the brim of the cup to make sure that the star will cover the whole cup behind it when I've got this all assembled. And all of my cups are going to hold my treats in them, and my stars are each going to have a number on top like this. I find that writing on the shiny cardstock doesn't work very well with the Cricut pens, so I've made additional little numbers that I'm going to glue on. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to glue on all of my numbers onto my stars, and then we'll be attaching all of the other pieces together. The design for this calendar is going to have 6 different strips of ribbon with cups on it. So we're going to have 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3 cups, giving me a total of 24 cups. So I want to lay out my cups on top of the ribbon. I put the bottom of the cup at the end of the ribbon. We need to have enough space between the cups to allow for the stars to sit on top. So I'm going to have the stars spaced like this. I'm going to measure out all of the 6 ribbon strips for my cups and stars and then glue the cups onto the ribbon by dabbing glue around the edge of the bottom of the cup and then gluing it onto the ribbon. I have my first strip of 5 cups on ribbon completed, so this is ready to be cut. I'm going to leave a little surplus ribbon at the top so that I can attach it to the dowels later. Once I have my first strand done, I can just place it next to my other strands of ribbon. I can glue the cups right next to each other, or I can offset them to take up the space in between. I'm going to offset them to keep my calendar slightly smaller.
When I have the cup standing on the wall, I want to ensure that the cup isn't leaning forwards like this. So I'm going to use some cardboard to reinforce the back of the ribbon. I like to use cereal box cardboard for this craft. I'm just going to glue this onto the ribbon so the cups don't pull away from the wall, and this will also help make the calendar more rigid. So simply glue and apply. I want to do this for all of the ribbons and so that the cardboard is far enough to cover all the cups and then some. So for example, on this 3-cup strip, the cardboard doesn't go all the way past the top cup, so I'm going to add some extra cardboard on top to keep it rigid. All of my ribbon now has cardboard reinforcing the back. The one thing I recommend is that the design side of the cardboard faces out so that it can't be seen through the ribbon. Now that all of the cups are lined up, what I need to do is use my dowel to hold the strips together. I'm using a 1/4-inch dowel, but you'll notice that mine isn't long enough to span the 6 full ribbon pieces. So I'm going to glue 4 pieces together, 2 on the left and 2 on the right, and then I'm going to glue those 2 together. This will help make the dowel rigid. With all of the cups lined up, I have space left over on the end so that I can attach the dowels to the top of the ribbons. I'm going to trim the ribbons so that they're all the same length and I have a good starting point. And then I'm simply going to glue this on and roll it underneath so that it doesn't look too gluey. And once I'm happy with the length, I can do one final glue so that the pieces don't roll away. With all of my cups glued down and my dowels installed, the last thing I need to do is insert all the candy into the cups. Time to put the numbers onto the cups. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to carefully apply glue around the edges of the cup, and then I'm going to stick my numbers on them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the big ones where I've got the treats, because those ones are special days, and then I'm going to attach numbers to the rest of them. Now the last thing to do is just to attach some ribbon onto the ends of the dowels so that I've got something to hang this up with. I don't want the ribbon to be too long so that there's not too much space for it to hang, just because the calendar is already relatively large. So I'm going to do just a little bit longer than the dowels themselves so that I've got space to tie it up, and then give it just a little bit of slack. Now that my ribbon's done, it's ready for hanging up. and my calendar is done.
You probably already have everything you need.
As suggested by the title of this video, I need toilet paper rolls for this craft. And when you don't have enough rolls, you can always use paper towel rolls as well. As with all of my projects, I like to sketch out the design beforehand.
Our calendar has 24 days on it because we don't do the countdown calendar on the 25th. So there's only 24 spots that I need. This design that I'm using has a star which takes up one spot, and I'm going to actually have an empty spot at the bottom because I don't need it, but if you wanted to do 25 you could use this design for that. And then the spots where I've got X's, I'm actually using no tubes because I need a little bit more space for the treat that goes into those spots. So the first thing I need to do is I need to count out my toilet rolls, and I know I didn't have enough. So I've got some paper towel rolls which will work just fine, so I'll need to cut them. So I need, according to my calculations, I need 20 rolls, so 12, so I need to get 8 more. These are a little bit longer than toilet rolls, so I can get 2 per, so I need them, each of them cut up. So for this design, if you don't have enough toilet rolls, you can always omit rolls every few spots and then just glue them the best that you can in order to give yourself a little bit more space. But not everyone has a surplus of 24 rolls just floating around. So there's an opportunity to miss spots here and there to give yourself a little bit more space. However, for my design, what we're doing is we are going like so. This is what my design is going to look like. What I'm quickly going to do is I'm going to hot glue these together, and I'm just going to sort of glue the walls together for each section, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next step. Now that the body of my Christmas tree is done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trace around the body and the walls of my Christmas tree with some wrapping paper. So I'm going to make my Christmas tree look like candy cane. So I'm just going to trace the Christmas tree, and then I'm going to have that as the front of my Christmas tree. Now I need 2 of these because I have a front and a back of my Christmas tree, so I will have to do another trace of this as well. When I'm cutting this out, I want to make sure that I'm cutting out a little bit around the edges so that I have a little bit of surplus material available for me. One last thing I need to do with the wrapping paper is I need to cut off a bunch of lengths that are going to cover my whole sides here. So I've got just about 4 inches here on my side of my rolls. So I just need to cut a bunch of 4-inch rolls, and then those will be ready to be glued on as well. I've got my side and my front and back for my Christmas tree. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually glue on one of the pieces for the back, and I'm also going to glue on after that the edge around the whole Christmas tree. This is so that the candies don't fall out when I'm putting them in later. What I like to do is I like to just use regular kids craft glue because I find that it works really well for this kind of thing. And I'm just going to put some glue around the edges of my rolls on the top here, and then I'm going to place my top on here. I cut a little bit extra so that I can put some of the edges over the outside, and that way I've got a nice finished look around the tree. The back doesn't need to look perfect because no one's actually going to look at the back. Now that my bottom is glued on, I just need to attach the side piece. What I'm going to do is I'm going to actually cut it in half so that I've got the candy canes all facing the same direction, and then underneath I'll have an extra piece that will sort of close it all in together. Now I'm just going to let my Christmas tree dry while I get my star ready. While my glue is drying on my Christmas tree, I'm going to put the star together. So the star I cut out on my Cricut, and the walls for the star I cut out just with a simple paper cutter. They're only 3 inches thick just because I'm running low on cardboard, but you could make them 4 inches thick to be the same thickness as the whole Christmas tree. I'll just make sure to glue it to the front. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to glue the walls of the cardboard onto the star, and then I'm going to glue them all the way around like so. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bend it all the way around so that I don't have to cut every single piece. A little bit less gluing that way. So I've got my star cut out and my paper folded up. So I'm just going to quickly drop a bead of glue along the edge here so that I can attach my star onto this, and I'm going to do that on both sides. So I glued my star together, and now all that's left to do is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim off this extra surplus edges on my tree on the back side because I don't need to actually see it. It just needs to hold the gifts in place. And then once that's done, I'm going to glue on my star, and then I'll get to start filling in all of my treats. So now I'm just going to glue the star up front. As I said before, I was running out of cardboard, so I made it a little bit smaller than my actual tree. So I'm going to glue it up front so that it kind of sits nicely where it's supposed to. Now for the fun part, I get to add in all of my treats. So the first thing I do is I'm going to put in all of my big treats into the tree so that they're taken care of for later. So those are a tight fit, and then I'm going to fit everything else in here to sort of make its way in. That's according to my calculations, so that's it. Now the most important thing is to take a picture of all these candies to make sure that I know where they all belong, especially these large ones because those are my fancy gifts. Now that all the candies are in the tree, I'm just going to quickly add a bead of glue around my star so that I can attach my star front, and then I'm going to attach beads of glue around all the edges here so that I can attach my front face on my tree. When I cut out the initial paper, I left a little bit of an edge. I'm just going to leave that edge on the paper on the tree so that it looks a little bit nicer. When you fold it down, it's going to start to look a little bit funny around the edges, and so I'm just going to leave it loose. The one thing that I'm going to do just with a paper clip, I'm going to punch holes in the slots that will be covered up, but that's going to help break through into the compartments later. Okay, and now that I've got my holes poked, I'm going to put on my decorations. So now that my tree is covered up, I can't actually see where any of the candies are. So that's why I took pictures initially. When I'm adding on my numbers, I will know where to sort of put which ones. These numbers I created, and you can get a free copy of them on my website if you'd like. They're just simple numbers on sort of shapes for Christmas. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to strategically place the pieces that I want to be with my special treats. So 24 Odyssey is up here, but the rest of them are all strategically placed so that they can be nicely enjoyed at certain times. Now that all my numbers are on, I'm going to do one last thing and put on some ribbon at the back so that I can tie this up on the wall. I like to tie my advent calendars up on the wall, but as this one is not level at the back, I'm going to actually attach my ribbon here. So I need a little bit longer of a ribbon so that it makes its way up onto the wall. So that's going to be probably about the right size. Maybe trim a little. That's going to be about the right size of ribbon for my project here. I'm just going to throw some glue down and let that cool down. And there you have it, your Christmas tree is done. The one thing that I didn't do on this tree is I didn't add additional color on the outside of the star, but the brown almost falls in line with the yellow, and since the calendars are only looked at really from the front, I don't think anyone's going to notice, but I could have added additional color around the outside of the star to make it a little bit prettier. But that's it. That's the calendar. So, if you've got some leftover materials at home, why not make something way more fun than just throwing them away? Let me know which one you're going to try first. And if you enjoyed this and like other easy DIY Christmas crafts, be sure to check out these other videos that I've got here for you. Thanks so much for watching, and happy crafting!